Tasmanian born?
Yes, I was born in Latrobe, Tasmania, in 1948.
And to what age did you stay down there?
Sorry?
To what age did you stay down there in Tassie?
I stayed there till I was, I think, 17. I think it was 17 or 18. It's funny, as time goes by and you reach, your 50-year-old sort of mark, you don't really remember exactly quite what periods of time things were. But yeah, it was about 17 or 18.
Growing up then down there, how accessible to you were the blues recordings that obviously influenced you later?
Very inaccessible. The rock and roll stuff, of course, was all there right through all the radio stuff. But in the mid-60s, when the Rolling Stones came out and the Beatles came out, and we first heard about, Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley and Muddy Waters and all these people, luckily, a guy named Stan Rofe, who, in a strange way, was the most pop-oriented DJ that you could ever imagine, actually played a whole pile of music by the original artists, not the copies of stuff that the Beatles and Rolling Stones had done, but he played the original version, and we all got really intrigued by that. And so back in Tasmania even, where we could hear 3UZ or 3KZ or whatever it was at the time, we actually got to hear all of this early stuff. And then, of course, we searched out those recordings. When I went to art school in Hobart, we searched out all sorts of stuff by Buddy Guy and Junior Wells, Howlin' Wolf, all those people. So we actually discovered this stuff bit by bit after discovering the Beatles and the Rolling Stones.
What about yourself? Did you have formal guitar training growing up?
No, I did about, 8 years of classical piano. And I basically got to hate it by the time the Beatles and Stones came out, and then transferred onto guitar. And quite frankly, none of that information made any sense as far as guitar was concerned until a few years later.
Tell us about some of your early bands. Bay City Union, what type of band was that?
The Bay City Union was it was probably a Chicago blues band copy band, if you know what I mean. Like, we loved Chicago blues, and we played versions of Chicago blues. We did stuff by Junior Wells and Buddy Guy and Muddy Waters and all those people, all those Chicago blues players. And we were a bit like, whereas the pop bands were sort of saying, oh, right, let's play the latest song by the Yardbirds, or the latest song by whoever the pop band was at the time, was saying, right, let's play a copy version of the whatever the Chicago blues band was. And so there was actually no difference between what we were trying to do and what the pop bands were trying to do, just that we liked blues music, and we were trying to copy that. And of course it was fairly obscure, so it made life a bit difficult.
Those other bands you were involved with before Chain, was there a common thread musically through them all?
Well, the common thread, I suppose, was the association of musicians between Brisbane and Melbourne. And like Billy Thorpe came from Brisbane, Lobby Lloyd came from Brisbane, Bay City Union. There were a lot of bands that came from Brisbane, and they were quite blues influenced, and they came to Melbourne and they linked up with the Melbourne thing. So there was a definite association there. But the main thing was that we all loved blues music. You know, we just loved it. It was that was the association.
Did Shane set out to develop a distinctly Australian blues sound, or did that sort of develop in later times?
No, absolutely no. Shane set out to play what they felt. Now, Shane started off with Wendy Saddington in about 1968, and Shane were virtually a soul band, playing popular soul stuff. Then we moved on and had a different lineup, and we moved into a sort of area where we were doing experimental music or whatever. Then we got Matt Taylor, and we did a sort of a blues thing, and Matt the whole thing was that over a period of 1968 to 1974, there was something like 26 members that went through Chain, and every time a new member joined the band changed, and it was always an expression of what we were trying to achieve as musicians, which was in those days an expression of our feelings. And that was what the whole thing was about in those days. Everybody was trying to absorb their influences, but also be original. And so, you know, you'd get a song that you might write that was similar to Freddie King, but it would be quite different to Freddie King because you had your own influences. And I think probably that is what the true blues sort of background is.
You just mentioned the lineup changes. It was something I was going to touch on. There have been so many over the years. Is it hard for you in interview situations like this to go back and keep tabs on it all?
Sorry? Is it hard for me to do what?
In interview situations like this, to go back and keep tabs on all those lineup changes and trying to remember who was where and when and...
Well, yeah, well, if you wanted to, yes and no. I'm pretty good with the material that we've recorded. If you asked me a song, I could tell you who played on it. You know, there's no problem about that, if that's what you mean.
Yeah. It was quite out of the ordinary, I guess, for a blues-based band to achieve the commercial success that you did in the early 70s. Did the significance of that set in with you at the time?
Oh, no, it didn't, because we didn't consider ourselves a blues band. We didn't consider ourselves anything other than a pop band of the day. And we had a major hit record. And it was only afterwards that we started getting called a blues band. We knew we had a blues influence, but for goodness sake, in the late 60s, mid-60s to late, the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, the Yardbirds, Manfred Mann, all these bands were blues bands. And let this not be forgotten. All those bands were blues bands. They were all influenced by blues. They all copied Muddy Waters or Chuck Berry or Bo Diddley or Howlin' Wolf. Everybody did that in the mid-60s. John Mayer. The actual real pop world, of course, was to do with what the Beatles did with songwriting and what the Rolling Stones did with songwriting. But the mainstream bands all made success on blues-based music. And not only blues-based music, but actually direct copies of their songs and actually new versions of their songs. So that was what the world was at that time. And Chain only followed that on. That's all we did. We wrote this song called Black and Blue, which had a work song sort of ethic to it and a big riff. and we had a major hit in Australia with it. We did nothing different to what was going on in the rest of the world at that time. That was just the way it was, you know. That was the blues had been a music that had been largely ignored by the white community for a long time, and in those early hippie days with the advent of Cream, John Mayall, even, I hate to say this, but even the Doors, even all that stuff, it actually brought blues, the blues style, to a sort of forefront, and we were on that thing. We happened to be there, and we had this major hit record, which is still a major hit record, you know. And so we were the first, in fact the only band to ever have a number one hit record in Australia with a blues record, you know, like a blues track, you know. So that was pretty special.
One of the things I've always felt has distinguished Chain from other Australian blues-based bands is its heavy emphasis on original material. Has that always been a priority for you guys, other than just covering blues standards?
Very much so. Very much so. I'm personally just recording after I mean my last album, Two Roads, I took a whole pile of old blues ideas and turned them into original songs. And Two Roads did very well for me. My new album, which I'm just starting to record now, will probably do much of the same. It will take those influences, those ideas, and put them into my own individual life. Now, what some people do is they'll take an old blues song and they'll change the riff and they'll sing the same lyrics, but it has nothing to do with their life. What I do is the same sort of idea as what the original black blues guys did. You take the riff, you take the idea, and then you change the words to suit your life, to suit your own experience. And that is the real essence of blues music. It's a living thing. It's to do with your life. It's to do with what's around you. And that's where Chain succeeded. That's where we sort of hit a chord with people, and that's where I hope personally to hit a chord with people nowadays, is that you're not addressing something that comes from, look, American blues is fantastic, that's where it all came from, but American blues lyrics are about American experience. Australian blues lyrics are about Australian blues experience, but within that you also have common things like love. Love is common right throughout the planet. You know, this is where blues has become really universal. That there are certain things that are really common. Where I found I had to change my thinking was that why should I sing about jumping on a freight train in Mississippi when I've never been to Mississippi? However, I have jumped on a freight train at Kempsey to get up. I didn't get to Brisbane, I got pretty close, but I've jumped on a freight train at Kempsey, and I put that in Just 18 on my Two Roads CD because it had an equivalent of a blues experience in America, and I used the musical form that was true to that feeling, you know. So, yeah, you've got to, I think anyway, you've got to sort of use the best that you have and not be too influenced by other people's experience. Take what you can get and put your own life into it, because otherwise it's not really truly a blues. It's actually only a copy of a blues.
Yeah.
A blues has to be something to do with your own life, and I think that Matt Taylor taught me that. Matt writes incredible songs about his own thing, and I really think that that's really the essence of it.
Terrific answer. After you left Chain the first time, you went through a few different outfits before, and a lot of session work too, before recording your first solo set. Were you a bit uncertain of a career direction in that time?
I've been uncertain of a career direction most of my life, because I did do lots of session work, and I've been in pop bands and I've been in blues bands, and I'm actually quite capable of playing most forms of music except jazz. Jazz and blues are very close anyway, but I think jazz requires a particular dedication. All forms of music require a certain form of dedication. And I've tended to sort of lean towards the simpler forms, which aren't necessarily simpler, but simpler in the technical sort of sense. And so I've leant towards things that are probably blues inclined, country inclined, and then I did all this session work, and somehow I ended up in an area where I'm known as a blues player, but I don't actually play blues most of the time. I only play it part of the time. I have all this other stuff, and I'm very happy about having that role, because I think blues, when you label yourself as strictly blues, it does limit you. In terms of people, a lot of people will think that, hey, blues is slow, blues is sad. Blues is not actually that. Blues is happy, blues is up, blues is dancing music as well. And country music also has elements of sadness, blues, and dancing and all that. So I really nowadays think of myself as just a guitar player who hopefully crosses well into all sorts of areas.
Would it be fair to say that the break time that you've had away from Chain helps keep things fresh in the times that you return to the band?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so. If I had to work with Matt and Dirk and Little Goose all the time, I'd go nuts. And I'm quite sure that you could ask any of them the same question and they'd all go, hey, we'd all go nuts. Because the days of working in a band where you really can get everything out in that band have long gone. We've all progressed and we all do our own things. Matt Taylor has got an incredible career as a solo performer and writer. And in fact, he wrote most of the material for our last album just because of the fact that he had so much of it. I didn't have so much myself at that time because I'd just done my Two Road CD. Little Goose, as a drummer, works in jazz. He teaches, he does all sorts of things. Dirk, the bass player, works with Little Fee, works with all sorts of people. Kirk Larange, So the days of sort of labelling yourself as one thing have actually gone, and that, as well as being constructive for ourselves, has been fantastic for Chain, because it means that when we go and perform, we're really fresh. We have all these other things we do. When we get together as Chain, we're enthusiastic. We perform, which is actually great, because there was a point some time back where Chain actually was very bored because we weren't getting new influences. Nowadays, when Chain gets together to do something, we have heaps of new influences. We're excited. We perform.
Great to hear. Fortunate enough to play with some of the legendary blues artists that would have been a great influence on you. Any standout memories there?
Muddy Waters is the greatest man I've ever met in my life. I named my son after him. My son's name's McKinley. Muddy's was McKinley Morganfield. Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee were another outstanding. Look, if you look up my website on www.philmanning.com.au, you can actually see. You can look up the history or whatever. You can see how many people I've actually toured with, and it's quite astonishing to me.
I've got it right in front of me. It's an impressive list, yeah.
It's quite astonishing. And in fact, we've just been going through it. I've got to add some stuff to that too, because you don't remember all of it, and we just got to add some stuff to it. And look, it's just so sensational that you have had the opportunity to do that, to play with these people. And I think for every one of the artists that I've performed with over the years, I could tell you a great story about what nice people they are and how sensational they are. And this is one of the really nice things about the music industry, is the fact that they wouldn't have got to where they've got to if they weren't nice people, you know, and it's pretty terrific.
Been based in Queensland for a while now. Is there a healthy blues scene up there?
Queensland is actually a place that in the early days, in the 60s, a great deal of the blues players came from. It was a very healthy scene despite its political backwardness at that time. And I suppose it still exists today to a degree, but I don't really think that any particular part of Australia at the moment can claim to have a good scene. The live music scene seems to be a bit slow, and people don't seem to be supporting going out to live venues as much as they used to. I personally think that most of them don't because they run too late. You know? Why do you want to go out at 11 o'clock and get home at 2? You know? I think that's one big thing.
That's a reasonable theory too. Yeah, I believe that. Your solo work in recent times has displayed an acoustic direction. Is that a way you've been wanting to go for a while?
Well, when I was about 17 or 18, I was very torn between being wanting to go into the folk music area or the rock area. And I ended up going into the rock area, and of course that ended up being the blues rock area. And blues and folk and blues and rock are very closely aligned. And over the years I've always loved acoustic playing, and probably about 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I started doing acoustic work, and it gradually led me away from the electric thing, the rock world. And believe me, I still do the rock world with chain and stuff, and I still love to. I still put me in front of a big pile of amps and give me an electric guitar, and I'll play full on as anyone. But I started to move into the folk area and started to discover how much value in music there was there. And I haven't looked back. Most of my work is acoustic work, and I really love it. It's fantastic. It's very confronting. You have to work very hard. There's lots of competition, and you have to play well. And I try my hardest in it.
You're getting your solo stuff out there independently these days. Did you go into that with a good prior knowledge of the work and the cost involved, and how have you found the experience?
I was well advised. My first couple of, I suppose, forays into the independent music world, they were a bit slow, but they went very well. My first album, It's Blues, was very good, but my CDs and stuff that I've done since, I've done through. It's on my own label, Tambourine Music, because I live at Tambourine Mountain in Queensland. But I've done it through Black Market Music, and John Durr has been a very good advisor, and we've done quite well, I think, in being like an independent label working through a distributor.
What would be the biggest headache of running your own label?
Sorry?
What would be the biggest headache involved in running your own label?
Well, the biggest headaches in running your own label are the fact that you cover you have to wear the costs, promotion, and it's not an easy business. And if you were to sort of get next to nothing from a major record company, they might give you lots of promotion, but you can't actually be guaranteed of that either, because if someone else is running hotter than you at the time, you'll be put aside. At least when you run your own show, you are in control. So if things don't go well, you can blame yourself. You can't blame anyone else. And I think that is a good thing. It's a good thing to not have other people to blame, because it keeps you positive rather than puts you into a negative situation. Like, oh well, if they'd done that, I could have done this. I think when you work independently, you can say, well, hey, we only did this, but we've achieved this. And in my case, since I've been independent, everything has been really, really good for me. It hasn't been huge, but it has grown and it develops. And I think that's the real issue. It must develop. You must have positivity, and you must be able to sort of figure at the end of the day, well, I'm better today than I was yesterday.
After all these years, Phil, with the guitar, do you still find yourself learning things about the instrument?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Absolutely. The guitar is an endless possibility. And the web today is really quite incredible. I mean, I've got my own little website at www.philmanning.com.au, and at the moment it's just history and CDs and things like that. But I hope that within a very short time, I've got to get my new CD done at the moment, which is taking up all my time. But once that's done, I want to do an educational number so that people can look that up and they can learn things, because there's so much stuff out there today that one can learn. It's just a fantastic whole new opening, and I hope I can add to it.
And musically, just before we wind up, is there a style of album that you haven't tackled yet that you'd like to have a go at still?
Mate, there's probably a million styles of album. I mean, there's styles of album that I couldn't even think about tackling, I mean, I've played on sessions for people as diverse as Kamal, Renee Gayer, Brian Cadd. I mean, there's a whole pile of people, a lot of the early Russell Morris stuff. I've played on all those things, but that's as an electric session player. In my own realm, I can only sort of go on what I like. And my back shed CD was instrumental, and it touched some Celtic areas as well as sort of classical areas almost. And then my two-road CD touched mainly blues areas plus a little bit of that Celtic and classical area. And I'm just hoping that my new CD will take those areas a little bit further, because I think that I really believe that despite all my change stuff and all the stuff I've done in the past, I've really found myself a nice niche with the acoustic blues, acoustic sort of folk, acoustic Celtic area that I've found at the moment. And they all cross up. They mix up a bit. I'm not no way a bona fide, genuine folk artist in any of those areas, but I tend to combine them, and it's worked really terrifically for me, and I'm hoping that my new album will just take that a little bit further.
Fantastic, and we look forward to it too. What's the plan there?
Well, I've just started recording. I've moved house, so I'm not sure whether my room's going to be soundproof enough to record them here, but I'm certainly working on it, and if I have to move over to a friend's place to finish it, I will. But these days, you know, you have your gear and you go and like I'm using old techniques that were used in the 30s and 40s to record. I'm recording music that, for all intentional purposes, has its roots back in the 20s and 30s, and as well as using modern techniques, I'm trying to incorporate some of the old recording techniques to keep the authenticity in the sound.
Okay, Phil, look, thanks for your time. It's been a treat speaking with you. Thanks for waiting up for me at this late hour.
That's okay.
Thanks for all the music, and we'll certainly be keeping our eyes and ears out for you in Melbourne in the near future.